Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is so good to see you all. You made it through the traffic. And so my name is Reverend Kelly Wilkins, and I am so glad to be here this evening. I will be your moderator for this evening, and I'll have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself, but I wanted to open this up in a word of prayer. So let's just bow our heads. Dear God, we just thank you for the opportunity for being here this evening. Thank you for getting us from our various destinations to this place, God, safely. We ask that you would be in this room here today. Give us wisdom and give us motivation and give us what we need that we might be able to grapple with this serious issue of mass incarceration. Open our eyes, Lord, and I ask that you be with each presenter here tonight, that what they share with us would be knowledge and wisdom and motivate us to move our feet and use our faith. We ask this in your blessed name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
So again, my name is Reverend Kelly Wilkins. I am so excited to be here with you. I am from Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ. Yes, we are Baptist and United Church of Christ. And maybe I can explain to you later how that is happened. But tonight, we're going to stay on our topic, the new Jim Crow. And I serve there as their Associate Minister of Social Justice and Reentry. And I am just honored to be here this evening, honored to be able to moderate this panel on this very important issue. It is a topic that I am very passionate about, that I've been passionate about since a very young age. And because incarceration has impacted my life as it has impacted many people's lives around me. And to see it happening in my communities, in my neighborhood, has made a deep impression on my life. So y'all look very serious. But what I want to do is first bring Joseph Deck out, the Executive Director of the Festival Center, and have him welcome you before we start our discussion. And we'll have an opportunity to also ask the panel people questions. Come on.
Thank you, Reverend Kelly. It is my honor to welcome you here at the Festival Center. This is what we love to see, just a gathering of folks who are coming to fight injustice and who not only want to read about it, but want to do something about it. So we're grateful that you came tonight, and we're grateful for our panel that's here, and the group, what do we call it, the New Jim Crow Group for Change. Thank you so much for all the work that went into bringing this great gathering of folks together. I want to just take an opportunity to lift up our Servant Leadership School just for a quick moment to let you know that we're going to have a summer session which will start June 26th through July 31st. So look out for that information coming. And we're also excited to announce that leading biblical scholar N.T. Wright will make a special appearance at the Servant Leadership School on Wednesday, May 9th. So please mark your calendars. Wright will share from and sign copies of his latest book, Simply Jesus, a new vision of who he was, what he did, and why he matters, and how God became king, the forgotten story of the gospel. He's covered a lot in one title there. And this event will begin promptly at 5 p.m. Copies of both books will be available for purchase from the Potter's House. Space is limited, so please RSVP on our website. Thank you so much, and I just want to recognize we have board members here. Rebecca Stella on the panel, representing the board, and there's Barbara Moore representing the board. It's always good to have board support. Thank you.
Let's give Joseph Deck a hand. Our next presenter is Jackie Morgan, and she's a member of the New Jim Crow Group for Change. And after her, we will see a video on the New Jim Crow. All right, let's give Jackie a hand as well. I am a member of the new Jim Crow Group for Change, and it's a new group that was created as a consequence of being inspired by this book by Michelle Alexander. Our purpose is to educate the public, advocate for racial justice, and protest against the astonishing trend towards mass incarceration that is specifically targeted at people of color. We sponsor community forums like this one to raise public awareness about racism in the criminal justice system and the war on drugs. We also raise awareness about the injustices faced by returning citizens, formerly known as ex-offenders, who struggle in the community to find jobs, housing, food, and other necessities to reestablish a stable life. We sponsor the Ban on the Box campaign. I think we have been successful with the first part in that DC government now will not have that box on job applications. However, contractors still do, so that's part of the fight that we're trying to sponsor. Is that right, Deborah?
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
We're a new group and we're interested in growing. So if you're interested in joining us, you can do that. We meet the third Saturday of every month in the back of the Potter's House down the street, 12 to 2:30. That's 1658 Columbia Road. I've been asked to do a timeline of what happens when you get involved in the criminal justice system. Michelle suggested that we read this book by Paul Butler, who is an ex-Washington, D.C. federal prosecutor, and he talks about the lock-up mentality of the police system and the over-policing of communities of color. Now, I live in a community of color in Anacostia Southeast, and yes, I saw police all the time, but I wasn't aware of the over-policing. However, I was aware of the fact that if you jaywalk in Anacostia, the police will stop you for jaywalking. I'm a consummate jaywalker. I jaywalk all over the city. I don't see that happening anywhere but in Anacostia. However, it was reading this book that I came to understand that my community is over-policed. And he talks about, as a consequence of it being over-policed, there's a guarantee of a high percentage of being stopped and arrested. And therefore, and he talks about the police following you until you do something wrong. And he says it doesn't take 3 or 4 blocks for that to happen. He talks about the police stopping you for not having a seatbelt, for not using your blinker, for having an air freshener hanging from your mirror, for expired tags, for waiting too long at a stop sign. It's almost as though, well, he talks about it in a lock-em-up mentality. So as a consequence of that, you're often stopped and you're arrested, then you're booked and bail is determined. Then there's a pretrial hearing and motions.
Jackie, can you get closer to the mic?
Okay. What I'm often hear about is plea bargaining, and that's when young people in particular will plead guilty whether they are or not, because they're promised a lesser sentence. And then there's a trial where you're sentenced. You all can help me, Yango and Beverly, if I miss a step. At the trial, you can be found guilty, you can be found innocent. However, either way, once you're on the record, you experience the new Jim Crow, which means that you will have difficulty finding a job, even if you're innocent. You will have difficulty finding receiving social services, which means Section 8, housing assistance, food stamps, medical assistance, voting. You just will not be able to function as a citizen once you are sentenced or found innocent. Is that right? Would you say that's right?
Yes,
Okay.
just about.
So that's the process. And I want to thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mike Smith, and I'm the the resident techie here. I have some copies of this, what we're going to see out there for sale. We're not really trying to make any money, but there's a suggested amount of $10. But if you can give more, okay. but I want all of it, or less, okay. But I want all of those CDs to go out of here, and you know, and I want you to start to share them with people because there's a good chance, probably 90% of the American population doesn't even know about this. And you can, you know, you can just have parties at your house and just show it, but it's a regular DVD that you can just pop in like you do all the other stuff. I'm gonna try to get somebody to click.
I believe that the systematic mass incarceration of poor people of color is tantamount to a new caste system, one specifically designed to address the social, political, and economic challenges of our time. There was a time when I resisted comparisons between mass incarceration and Jim Crow and mass incarceration and slavery, believing that those kinds of comparisons were exaggerations, distortions, and were actually more likely to do harm than good to efforts to reform the criminal justice system and achieve greater racial equality in the United States. But after years of working on issues of racial profiling, representing victims of racial profiling, police brutality, investigating patterns of drug law enforcement in poor communities of color, and attempting to assist people to quote-unquote re-enter into a society that never seemed to have much use for them in the first place, I had a series of experiences that began what I call my awakening. I began to awaken to a racial reality that seems so obvious to me now that what seems odd in retrospect is that I had been blind to it for so long. When I joined the ACLU, I was director of the Racial Justice Project for the ACLU in Northern California. I assumed that our criminal justice system had problems of racial bias, much in the same way all institutions in our society are infected to some degree or another with conscious or unconscious bias and stereotyping. And so I thought, well, I have a lot of experience in the employment discrimination field. I had been working at a firm suing Fortune 500 companies for employment discrimination. You know, I thought, well, I'll just use the tools that I had developed in the employment discrimination context as a civil rights lawyer and apply them to criminal justice reform and work with others to root out racial bias wherever it might rear its ugly head in the criminal justice system. But by the time I left the ACLU, I had come to suspect that I was wrong about the criminal justice system. It's not just another institution in our society infected with racial bias, but a different beast entirely. That mass incarceration of poor people of color now operates as a fully comprehensive and well-disguised system of racial control analogous to Jim Crow. I state my basic thesis in the introduction where I write, what has changed since the collapse of Jim Crow has less to do with the basic structure of our society than the language we use to justify it. In the era of colorblindness, it's no longer socially permissible to use race explicitly as a justification for discrimination, exclusion, and social contempt. So we don't. Rather than rely on race, we use our criminal justice system to label people of color criminals and then engage in all the practices we supposedly left behind. Today, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against criminals in nearly all the ways it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. Once you're labeled a felon, the old forms of discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, denial of the right to vote, exclusion from jury service, are suddenly legal. As a criminal, you have scarcely more rights and arguably less respect than a black man living in Alabama at the height of Jim Crow. We have not ended racial caste in America, we have merely redesigned it. Now, here are a few of the facts that I uncovered in the course of researching the book that were part of my awakening. More African American adults are under correctional control today, in prison or jail, on probation or parole, than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began. In 2004, more black men were disenfranchised than in 1870. the year the 15th Amendment was ratified, prohibiting laws that explicitly deny the right to vote on the basis of race. Now, of course, during the Jim Crow era, poll taxes and literacy tests operated to keep black folks from the polls. Well, today, felon disenfranchisement laws accomplish what poll taxes and literacy tests ultimately could not. It was recently reported that a black child born today has less of a chance of being raised by both parents than a black child born during slavery. This is due in large part to the mass incarceration of black men. There was an article about this that ran recently in The Economist magazine entitled "How the Mass Incarceration of Black Men Harms Black Women." And the article explained that the majority of black women in the United States are unmarried, including about 70% of black professional women, and that this is due in large part to the mass incarceration of black men, which takes them out of the dating pool at the years that they would be most likely to commit to a partner, to a family. But what's worse is that it renders them permanently unemployable in the legal job market, virtually guaranteeing that a large majority of them will cycle in and out of the criminal justice system for the rest of their lives. In this way, mass incarceration has decimated black families to a degree comparable to slavery. In some major urban areas, more than half of working-age African-American men have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. In fact, in Chicago, if you take into account prisoners, who of course are excluded from poverty statistics and unemployment data, thus greatly exaggerating the well-being of the African-American community. In fact, standard black unemployment rates, if you were to include prisoners, you would add about 15 to 25 percentage points to that figure. But it was reported in 2004 that if you take into account prisoners, nearly 80% of working-age African-American men in the Chicago area have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. These men are part of a growing undercaste, not class, caste. A large group of people defined largely by race who are relegated to a second-class citizenship by law and custom for the rest of their lives. Now, I find when I tell people today that, I think that mass incarceration is, the new Jim Crow, or that mass incarceration functions a lot like slavery, people usually react to me with a shocked disbelief. They say, well, how can you say that? Just look at Barack Obama, just look at Oprah Winfrey, look at Condoleezza Rice, look, and the list goes on of, high-profile, visible African Americans who have made it, who have achieved great wealth, power, and fame, is proof that nothing like a caste system could possibly exist in the United States today. But of course, the reality is that no caste system in the United States has ever governed all black people. There have always been free blacks and black success stories, even during slavery and Jim Crow. During slavery, there were some black slave owners, not many, but some. And during Jim Crow, there were some black lawyers and some black doctors, not many, but some. Now, the extraordinary nature of individual black achievement in formerly white domains certainly suggests that the old Jim Crow system is dead. But it doesn't necessarily mean the end of racial caste. If history is any guide, it may have just taken a different form. I think any honest observer of American racial history has to acknowledge that the rules and reasons the legal system employs to enforce status relations of any kind, they evolve and they change as they're challenged. In the first chapter of the book, I described the cyclical rebirths of racial caste in America. African Americans have repeatedly been controlled through institutions like slavery and Jim Crow, which appear to die, but then are reborn in new form, tailored to the needs of the time. Of course, following slavery, a new system was born to replace slavery, known as convict leasing. After the Civil War, black men were arrested en masse, typically for minor crimes like loitering and vagrancy. It was our nation's first prison boom. They were arrested, sent to prison, and then leased to plantations. The idea, of course, was that they had to earn their freedom, but the catch was they could never pay back their plantation owner enough, to cover the costs of their clothing and shelter, and so they were effectively re-enslaved for the rest of their lives. Douglas Blackmun has written an excellent book about this called Slavery by Another Name. Well, today, I think our criminal justice system has been used once again in a manner that effectively recreates caste in America. Now, for those who find that kind of claim hard to swallow, I say consider the facts. Our prison system has quintupled in a period of about 30 years for reasons that have stunningly little to do with crime. We've gone from a prison population from about 300,000 to well over 2 million. We now are the world's leading, incarcerator. Yet crime rates have gone up, have gone down, today are at historical lows. Most criminologists and sociologists today will acknowledge crime rates and incarceration rates in the United States, they've moved independently of one another. Imprisonment rates have soared regardless of whether crime has been going up or down in any given community or the nation as a whole. And yet black imprisonment in particular has consistently soared. It was reported several years ago that in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, 3 out of 4 young black men in nearly all those in the poorest neighborhoods could expect to serve time in prison. Rates nearly as shocking can be found in other poor communities of color across America. So what happened? What happened? Well, the answer is a war was declared. A war was declared on poor communities of color, a Get Tough movement and a war on drugs that has decimated poor communities of color. In fact, drug convictions have been the engine of mass incarceration and the emergence of a new racial undercaste. If you take a look at the period between 1985 and 2000, nearly 2/3 of the increase in the federal system were due to drug convictions alone, and more than half of the increase in the state system was due to drug convictions alone. By the year 2000, there were more people returning to prison on probation and parole violations than had been locked up for all offenses in 1980. So this massive new prison system was born, and millions of people became shuttled into the system primarily for nonviolent offenses and drug-related offenses, swept into the system, branded criminals and felons, and then released into a permanent second-class status for life. Now, the drug war has been waged almost exclusively in poor communities of color, even though studies have now shown for decades that, contrary to popular belief, people of color are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than whites. In fact, in some surveys, it indicates that white youth are actually more likely to engage in illegal drug dealing than black youth. But that's not what you would guess by looking inside our nation's prisons and jails, which are overflowing with black and brown drug offenders. In some states, 80 to 90% of all drug offenders sent to prison have been African American. But still, people will say to me, well, the reason we're waging the drug war in those ghetto communities, in those poor communities of color, is because that's where the violent offenders are, that's where the drug kingpins are, so it makes sense for us to be waging the war in those communities. In fact, most people assume that the war on drugs was declared in response to the emergence of crack cocaine in inner city communities and the related violence. But that's not true. It's not true. The war on drugs was officially declared by President Ronald Reagan in 1982. President Richard Nixon was the first to coin the term a war on drugs, but it was President Ronald Reagan who turned that rhetorical war into a literal one. And at the time he declared that drug war, drug crime was actually on the decline, not on the rise. It was a couple years before, not after crack first hit the streets. So why was this drug war declared? because Ronald Reagan wanted to make good on campaign promises to get tough on a group of people who had not so subtly been defined as black or brown in the media and the political discourse. The war on drugs and the Get Tough movement was part of a Republican Party strategy, known as the Southern Strategy, of using racially coded Get Tough appeals on issues of crime and welfare to appeal to poor and working class whites, particularly in the South, who were threatened by, resentful of, anxious about many of the gains of African Americans in the civil rights movement. You know, poor and working class whites, had their world rocked by the civil rights movement. Wealthy whites could send their kids to private schools and give their kids all the advantages that wealth had to offer. But it was poor and working class whites whose kids might potentially be subject to a desegregation order. It was their kids who were going to be having to compete for the first time on equal terms with this whole group of people that they've been taught their whole lives to believe were inferior to them for, decent jobs. And this anxiety and resentment was fertile ground for politicians who wanted to exploit those racial divisions. And pollsters and political strategists found that by using get tough rhetoric on issues of crime and welfare, that they could persuade poor and working class whites in the South to defect from the Democratic New Deal coalition and join the Republican Party in droves. Well, the Reagan administration got lucky, because a couple of years after the drug war was declared, crack hit the streets and spread to inner city communities across the country. And the Reagan administration seized on this development with glee, hiring staff whose job it was to feed stories to the media of crack babies, crack dealers, crack users, the so-called crack whores, in the hopes of turning crack into a media sensation, which they believed would bolster public support for the war and guarantee that millions more dollars would flow to waging it. And the plan worked like a charm. Almost overnight, television sets were flooded with images of crack babies, crack users, crack dealers, and soon Democrats began competing with Republicans to prove who could be tougher on them. And so it was President Bill Clinton who presided over the most dramatic escalation of the drug war at the same time as he ended welfare as we know it, all in an effort to appeal to that same group of white swing voters, a task that was made easier once crack had actually hit the streets and violence had become a real problem in these communities. And it was the Clinton administration who championed laws banning drug offenders from public housing and denying them even food stamps for the rest of their life. And within an incredibly short period of time, we suddenly had millions of poor people of color locked into a permanent second-class status, having to check that box on employment applications, have you ever been convicted of a felony, for the rest of their lives. Leaving prison unable, barred even from public housing, families risking eviction if they even let their family members return home to them, people being barred even for food stamps for the rest of their lives. What are folks supposed to do? Can't get a job, barred from housing. Food stamps may even be off limits to you. Well, what we expect people to do is to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars in fees, fines, court costs, accumulated back child support, and in a growing number of states, the costs of year imprisonment. And then get this, even if you're one of the lucky few who managed to get a job, up to 100% of your wages can be garnished to pay back all these fees, fines, court costs, accumulate back child support. What is the system designed to do? It seems designed to send people right back to prison, which is what in fact happens about 70% of the time. About 70% of released prisoners return within 3 years, and the majority of those who return do so in a matter of months, because the challenges associated with mere survival on the outside are so immense. So what do? I say nothing short of a major social movement has any hope of ending mass incarceration in America. If we were to go back to the rates of incarceration we had in the 1970s, a time when many civil rights activists thought that rates of incarceration were just egregiously high, If we were just to go back to those bad old days, we would have to release 4 out of 5 people who are in prison today. More than 1 million people employed by the criminal justice system would lose their jobs. So I believe it's going to take a major social movement, not just mere tinkering with this system or piecemeal policy reform. Thank you.
I have a couple of, thank you.
Our panelists. So the very first person I know personally, her name is Deborah Rowe, and she is a passionate woman. She's a person who never sleeps. I really don't think she sleeps. But in the world of, when I was in seminary, I would call her a womanist. We studied womanist theology, and that is an African-American woman who is a woman of faith. She's a woman who bonds with other women, but at the same time, she's a woman who will improve her community, improve life for her black men, her children, and for the entire community and universe. Is a person who really puts her feet to the fire. And so I have enjoyed working with Deborah on many things, and she is the director of, executive director of Returning Citizens United, and really is probably about 10 of the things that she belongs to, but that's what she is claiming today. And so we'll have an opportunity to talk to Deborah. Let's just give her a hand. Testing.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Okay. And thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you. I could say the same for you. The feeling is mutual. First, thank you all for coming out. How many of you all, is this your first time hearing Michelle Alexander's a speech or about her book, or, you know, any? Okay, good. That's what this forum is about. We, the group, the New Jim Crow Work Group for Change and Returning Citizens United and the Movement for Peace and Love, all of us, we know, but it's our community, the community around us that is not aware, and where we have to really inform them of how this is just really impacting all of our neighborhoods. I'm really focused on the District of Columbia and how it relates to us in D.C. Of course, we're a part of the national movement, but we have to start right here at home. One of our biggest problems here at home are our leadership, our government leadership. They don't support people coming home from prison. They don't support, as a matter of fact, they gave our prisoners away to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We had a prison here, Lorton. How many of y'all remember Lorton Reformatory? We had Lorton. They signed our inmates over to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and now our inmates are all over the country, just scattered. We had one of our brothers committed suicide about 2 or 3 months ago. Wasn't it George? He committed suicide, and I related his.
I commend everybody and thank everybody for showing up here tonight to help out, to listen, and not only to listen but to get involved. We do a second part in The Strength of Love. Is another book that we read, and it's about Gandhi, because Dr. King learned from Gandhi. And Gandhi, what he did, he freed India from England. So we can do the same thing, but it takes us to be on one accord. It takes us to be on the same spirit, have the same spirit, and share with one another what's going on, to talk and to dialogue with one another. We all are a part of the body. So it's important for us to know that we are members. It takes a lot of members to make the body. So it's important for us to be connected. And the more we're connected, that is our strength. The more we allow the Spirit of Christ to move us, it is our strength. We will not fear, we will not fail. So it's important for the people in this room tonight that when you leave here to go tell everybody. Understand what Sister Michelle was talking about. That is very important. Understand the laws and everything. But most important, let us help the people as they come out. Let us grab them as opposed to the people, the few people who are in the street. Becca talked about the dream. The dream is important. God wants us to unite. It is very important for us to be united as one, as a body. How can we do this? We keep coming to forums like this, which is great, but it's even better when we come together and we share what we have. We have a system that God put out here called manna. If I have a little more than I need, then the extra, I need to share that. That is so important. And as I share that, I get stronger. My spirit is stronger. My faith is stronger. And as whoever I go close to, they would feel the radiance of this faith, of this spirit. And they will engulf that. And wherever they go, they would carry that. So it's so important for us to understand what the strength of love is all about. I had to learn how to be selfless, not worry about myself so much. God has taken care of me, all my needs and everything. Let me assist someone else. Let me say this and be quiet. Coming up, I was a kid, I learned how to play the game of basketball. And playing the game of basketball, you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 positions. I was a 1. The 1 had to learn the other 4 positions. His duty was to what? Put them in position and assist them. It is our duty as a body of Christ to assist the brothers who are hurting, who are broken, who needs help. That is very important that we do this. So I beg y'all and I plead to y'all to truly keep coming back. Truly do what you can in your neighborhood to help someone. Write a letter, go visit somebody, and if you can contribute monetarily or your time, it would be most appreciated. Thank you very much.
And basically he says that, you know, there is no faith without justice. And so our faith and justice are the same. And I see that on the work that the Church of the Savior is doing. So we really appreciate that. And so we have our next person. You guys are really good. You stop at 10 minutes. I don't even have to stop you or anything. But our next person, I see him everywhere. Our church is east of the river. I see him east of the river. I hear him on the radio. I see him. I go to marches or protests. He's right there. I look to my left. He's holding a sign. I thought God was only omnipresent. But I think Yango Sawyer might got some of that in him. And so Yango, he is here representing probably many organizations, Returning Citizens, co-founder of Jobs Not Jails Coalition, founder and CEO of Movement for Love and Unity Incorporated, and DC coordinator of the National End Mass Incarceration Movement. That's why I see him everywhere, because he never stops. And so I'm gonna, without further ado, let Yango let us know what he's doing and what he's up to.
Because it took courage for you to come in here tonight. That's why the room is not full. You know, and I'd like for you to give yourself a hand. And before I make what I got, I just want to acknowledge, first of all, stand up please, Ramsey. Ramsey is a guy that was in Florida. He was at the forefront of the self-help movement. And when we talked about habilitation, not rehabilitation, because you assume that folks have been habilitated when you talk about rehabilitation. Is that correct?
Right.
You know,
That's what they mean.
and so what self-help groups that Ramsey and a number of other folks did was begin to habilitate folks. You know, and in the process of habilitating folks, they become transformations, agents of change. And when they came in the community, they began to do things that become positive and constructive and never went back to jail. So I'd like to give Ramsey a big hand. Lady Lee, stand up, please, sister. This sister here is made in the mold of Reverend Kelly and Deborah Rowe and number of other black women. When I talk about made in the mold, I'm talking about a Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Fannie Lou Hamer. You know, black women who made a difference in our community, who had the courage to stand up and say, I ain't gonna take it no more. Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And Sister Linda Leach is involved in the housing struggle. You know, not only for folks who live in the community, but for men and women who are coming back to prison. Housing is a crucial issue for men and women coming back. We give Sister Linda Leach a good hand. The first two things I disagree with Deborah in terms of this movement. But I disagree with some folks need to be locked up. See, because the kid, he got 90 years, that's what some folks said. He needs to be locked up. The young kids, 13 and 14 years old, doing life without parole, somebody said they need to be locked up. The youngsters who went to jail 25 years ago to Fuller, that was involved with the Fuller case, it did 25 years to 30 years, and finding out now that there was prosecutorial misconduct, somebody said they need to be locked up. And I think what we need to do, we need to change the whole concept of prisons. We need to talk about re-educational centers. We need to talk about transformation centers. We need to talk about programs like they have running these transformation centers, because we find that prisons don't work. That's why Sister Michelle Alexander said that we can't reform this system. We have to dismantle it. Yes. It can't be reformed. It cannot be reformed, and we have to remember that. And let me tell you how I got here. I got here because I went to prison at an early age, around 10 years old, for running away from home. And I kept going to jail. I kept going to jail because prison didn't work. I learned a lot of things in prison that kept me coming back to prison. But then something happened to me. I was in a prison in Youngstown, Ohio. And I'd like to just take this moment, if we could, maybe, Charles Colson.
There are a couple of things. The first thing I recommend is that you join the new Jim Crow work group for change. You need to join that. You need to join this group. They've been committed. I joined them, I guess, about 6 months ago, but they're just, committed. They're there. They said they're there at the Potter's house. Every third Saturday, they are there, you know, and working on ideas. And their main focus is to educate the community. Educate the community. Get on. You signed up. You put your email out there. Get on some of the listservs and keep informing yourself. The Occupy DC Criminal Injustice, Students Against Mass Incarceration. Get on some of these listservs and at least stay informed. And they're always putting out actions that they're taking, so when you can go. The other thing is, you know, and I'm always going to come take it back to our elected leaders, because it's you know, anyway. But Phil Mendelson is the chairman of the Committee on Public Safety. You know, make your concerns known to him. Call their office. Take up a petition in your neighborhood. And like Daniel said, police to police.
I just wanted to say on the question of laws and how to change the laws. So the image that comes to mind for me when I think about that, I think of being on children on a playground. And so once upon a time, there's me on a playground, and then Larry came along. I'm like, Larry, let's play a game on the playground. And here's the rules. And the rules are that whatever I want, I'm Becca, and whatever I want, I get. And I get to be better than you all the time, and anything you have gets to be mine, and it's all about me. That's the first rule. And the second rule is we pretend like everything's equal. And that's the way the game goes. And the game keeps on playing and playing and playing and playing. And over a couple generations, we get pretty used to our respective roles within that. But somehow it doesn't occur to us that we could stop playing that game and pick up on a different part of the playground and start to play a different game. And I feel like if I'm an adult on that playground and I see that behavior happening between two children, at some point I need to tell the one who's being taken advantage of, you know what, you don't have to play that game anymore. You can not participate. And whoever is the oppressor in that situation isn't probably going to volunteer, you know what, because it's fun. I don't know if it's fun, but it's self-serving for the oppressor to keep going. So the way that I have been thinking about it lately and been in conversation with others lately, and as Larry said, we've been reading Gandhi, and Gandhi talks about there's nothing to overcome. We don't have to overcome evil. We have to remove ourselves from participating in the system of evil. We have to remove ourselves from playing that game on the playground. So if it's one person, so now you're not talking about two people, but you're talking about, you know, this whole global mess. But if it's one person, that person is going to get punished. But if it's a whole movement of people, then there's nothing you can do to stop it, right? And if it's a whole movement of people fueled by the Spirit of God, there's no stopping it. So, so to me, the question is not only how do we change the laws, but which is appealing to the oppressor to change something, but is how do we empower the hearts, how do we empower the Spirit, how do we empower those of us who need to stand up to the injustice and remove ourselves from the system to be so courageous as to do it together. How do we establish and bond that kind of community to rise up?
I have a suggestion.
Thank you, but who has a suggestion? So
I'm a part of this too. The two who just spoke like that. I'm a part of that too. The two that just spoke. Amen to everything they said. But in order to make a difference, for people like us to make a difference and to build on what they're doing, we need to be able to do some things in the places where we're going to go home to. McDonald's is an underwriter and investor in the private prison system. You want to know what you can do? You can encourage people to boycott McDonald's. It's very important to do what we're doing in Strength to Love. To build those houses, to be able to house people and help them heal, become whole, and become leaders in the community. But the people who undergird the system, undergird it because it's economically feasible to undergird it. And the only way to get their attention is to make it less economically feasible. And there are things that ordinary people can do in order to do that. The Wells Fargo situation has begun to make that apparent. Who is it? Target or the other? What's the other? Walmart. Walmart is a primary investor in the private prison system. We can boycott Walmart. You can pass that information on to your churches, your civic organizations. We can all do this. We can be participants in the overthrow of the system.
That's right.
It's fine to come together and encourage one another, but what we do when we go home is what counts.
Yeah, my name is Florence, and I'm not active at the moment in the group that's sponsoring this, but I have been a part of it. I'm a part of the spiritual support group that meets at Potter's House called Spiritual Support Group 4. I really applaud what you're saying, Yvonne. And one of the things, I'm so glad that both Gandhi and Martin Luther King have been brought before us, because I've done their readings and so on, but what stands out for me in my formative years growing up was that they led marches. The resistance that they encouraged was not just that they boycotted individually, but they went back to their home church and said, everybody don't go to Walmart's. They went out in front of Walmart's or wherever with signs, with placards. They brought other people there so that it became a movement of protest. And I'm reminded that, you know, my visions of the South when the civil rights movement was at its height was of large numbers of people, groups that eventually became large numbers of people walking together, confronting the evil. And it wasn't quite that easy. They were hosed, they were beaten, all kinds of things happened to them. So that it's important to remember that as we engage in this kind of battle, there are consequences. It's one of the reasons why some of us don't go out there, because there are consequences. I remember when I first came to Washington, just before we went into Iraq, I left the Church of the Savior on Massachusetts Avenue one Sunday morning, and a large group of us went down to a big rally down on the end of, the park down at the end of 16th Street, etc., with big placards and things. But we had a huge group that said, we won't tolerate this anymore. And you build on that. So my suggestion would be, you know, following up on the things that Yolanda's saying, is that when we do this, we don't just take it back to our communities and say, okay, let's everybody in our church not buy from Walmart, so let's not go to McDonald's. We have to make that visible. We have to make that visible. And I would urge you to come, you know, again, join us, you know, as we try to build these strategies, you know, in the movement that's taking place here. Because if we don't do that, if we don't get together, even the act of getting together to make placards is strengthening.
Yes, the sentencing project. I knew that. I knew that.
Washington Lawyers Committee.
Okay, y'all gonna give it to me. Y'all gonna give it to me.
My name is Maria. I would like to invite all of you to join me in protesting again in front of Wells Fargo at 14th Street and Park Road. It was going on during the winter every Friday at 4:30. And this last couple of Fridays, nobody else showed up. So, but I think we can make it grow again. It's an important thing to do. Wells Fargo has $500 million invested in the GEO group. And I have signs, I have flyers, and if I just get a couple of people to join me, we are ready to go. It's a friendly event. We'll just talk, you know, pass out flyers and talk to people on the sidewalk. You know, a lot of people go to the bank on Friday afternoon. It's a good time to go.
So, with that being said, thank you so much. I'm very honored that you allowed me. I'm signing off. But I'm gonna give her. I'm getting all the waves and flags here, but I'm signing off just to let you know I've been very honored to be your host today, your moderator, and I hope that you got something out of this. I hope that your hearts were pierced and your consciousness was raised on some issues that you may not have been able to grasp before. And I hope that your commitment to racial equality has been deepened by our discussion. So thank you very much. And Patricia coming in.
Thanks, Kelly. My job is to tell you what you can do, but I think that's kind of happened. My name is Trishni Moore. I'm part of the DC New Jim Crow Group for Change. And as Deborah said, and Jackie said earlier, and Kelly has said, we are really all about raising awareness. And I feel like, even though I know some of you said you hadn't known about Michelle Alexander's book, and so this was new to you, this is a group that we're preaching to the choir here, and it's really exciting to hear all of you talking about what's going on. We are very interested in getting beyond the choir and raising the awareness farther and farther out into the world. There are some DVDs out as you came in tonight at the table out near the door. We are asking a donation of $10, but we are really interested in you having them and sharing them with people. If $10 is too much, take one. If you can give something, that would be nice. It helps us make more DVDs. to get the word out. But we're really very interested in getting those DVDs out in the world and being shared by a lot of people. There is a lot of literature on the back table. A lot of the things that people have spoken about tonight here are, there's literature about them, about specific events with dates and times. The Wells Fargo boycott website, I just discovered, has a wonderful set of links to a lot of organizations that are doing work, related work, including Deborah's organization, Returning Citizens United, and Yango's organization, and others. So it's a good website for the Wells Fargo information, but also for what else is going on in DC. There's a petition circulating. It's like a bright green color for DC residents on the Ban the Box issue to supplement the calls you're all going to make tomorrow to your DC City Council members. I am not a resident of the District of Columbia, but I hope those of you who are will do that. And one of the pieces of literature back on the table, the version I have is this color, but there's also a purple version of it. This is a fact sheet of mass incarceration facts, but it has information about the DC Region Code Group for Change when we meet, which is the third Saturday of every month at the Potter's House from 12:30 to 2:30 in the back room. We are a small band of committed people. We are always happy to have more people join that group and help us to put these kind of forums on and to spread the word. We also have Michelle Alexander's book for sale for $20 out by the door. If you haven't signed in and you're interested in being on an email list, please sign up on your way out. And this was a very full house tonight. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming.
I'll plug also, come be with us third Saturdays. We need more people power. We want to take this kind of forum to every ward of the city, and we'll do it in every ward of the city as many times as we possibly can. So if you're part of a civic organization, you're part of a church, you're part of a temple, you're part of a mosque, I don't care what it is, and you want us to help educate your congregation, we'll be there. We have panelists, we have more panelists than this. We will come out and do it. We want to get the word out. If you have a venue for us, please stop and see Trish or Dawn or I, and let us know, or Deborah, and we will be in touch and find a time and we'll bring it to your door.
Amen.
I work for an organization that is outreach to homeless individuals, unfortunately in Montgomery County. I'm a DC resident, but work in Montgomery. And what I can tell you that we need, and that organizations here in DC need, are mentors, volunteers to come in to those organizations serving the reentry population, many of whom are homeless, who can't find housing, who need help finding out how to do a resume, a cover letter, how to do job searches online. The fact that hotels, the hospitality industry is one of the few industries that hires reentry folks and will send them up the ladder if they do well in their jobs. Some of the unions are training reentry folks to do work. So hook up to all the organizations that are around doing this work.
And call your congressperson if you don't live in DC, because this is call your congressperson, because this is a move, this needs to happen nationally. There is a Ban the Box movement, national Ban the Box movement, but we need to have the federal government pass the law and everything.
That's right. We're working with DC. Now, Don, you have something you want to say?
Just real quick, I was going to say the Servant Leadership School does provide classes. David Hilfiger's teaching one now, and I believe it has something to do with the Jim Crow book, right? Not this one.
Soon, though, soon.
Your mom is teaching, and David sometimes does. There's always classes around in this community, and it's nice to read the book with others. I mean, that's how a lot of us got involved. It's kind of hard to read that book by yourself. It's nice to do it with a group. So if you get a chance, a book study in some little pocket around, you might start a book study, get some books reading. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you. And let's thank our panelists who did a wonderful job. you.